Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the most magnificent, yet honestly deeply mysterious structures on the planet. I want you to picture this. You're standing way up in central India's Vindhya Hills. Rising super dramatically out of the flat plains around you is this long, narrow, rocky outcrop, locally known as the Gopachal Rock. And perched right on top of it, commanding absolute authority over literally everything below, is the great Gwalior Fort. It's a place of breathtaking beauty, for sure, but as we're going to see today, it also hides some truly terrifying secrets. Okay, let's dive into this, because to truly understand Gwalior Fort, we first have to understand its reputation. This wasn't just another standard military outpost. This was one of India's most coveted citadels. The very first Mughal emperor, Babur, famously called it the pearl in the necklace of the forts of India. Just think about that imagery for a second. Among all the incredible fortifications scattered across the entire subcontinent, this one was the absolute jewel. It was the prize that every great king and conqueror wanted to wear around their neck. Section 1. Empires Rise and Fall, a 1,300-year legacy. Let's move on and see how this builds, because absolutely no other fort in India has seen more rulers come and go. When you look at its staggering 1,300-year recorded history, it's witnessed a massive turnover of empires. It was held by ancient Hindu dynasties, then captured by Turks, Afghans, and the Mughals. By the 18th century, the Maratha Scindia dynasty took control, and eventually, it became a British protectorate right up until Indian independence. So it's really been a silent witness to a constant churn of absolute power. 60,000. I really want you to let that number sink in. That's 60,000 square kilometers. That was the vast extent of the Gwalior state under the Maratha Scindia dynasty back in the late 18th century. To put that into perspective, whoever held this fort didn't just hold a piece of rock. They held the keys to an impossibly massive territory. This number represents the immense, sprawling power that was concentrated right here within these walls. Section 2. Marvels Above Ground, Architecture and Scale. So we're going to start by looking at what was built above ground, and the sheer scale of the masonry here is simply spectacular. Look at this number, 58. That's the height in feet of a colossal rock sculpture of Adinath, the first Jain Tirthankara, carved directly into the cliffside. And that's just one of many 7th to 15th century Jain cave temples here. The whole fort is this vibrant, towering celebration of the absolute best of ancient Indian masonry and stone carving. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the fort was so highly prized by all those empires. When you look at the physical dimensions, you realize it's an architectural marvel perfectly designed for defense. It stretches almost 2.5 kilometers long, yet the average width is just under 1 kilometer. And most importantly, those massive ramparts are built on cliffs which, in most parts, are near vertical. It's like an eagle's nest, providing an unparalleled strategic advantage over the surrounding plains. And right at the heart of this impenetrable fortress is the Man Mandir Palace. Built in 1486 by one of Gwalior's greatest rulers, Tomar Rajput Raja Man Singh, this is the building that gives the fort so much of its splendor. Imagine standing outside it in its prime. It's famous for its bright, intricate, incredibly colorful tile work. It was a spectacular pleasure palace of grand halls where favored royals carried on a life of unabashed pomp, luxury, and glory. It's literally a feast for the eyes. Section 3. The Dark Descent, Hell's Dark Secrets. Now, what's really interesting and honestly chilling about this slide is how it highlights the jarring, terrifying contrast of two entirely different worlds inside Man Mandir. Out in the open, you have this beautiful, majestic architecture. But when you walk down those stairs, inside, the vibe completely changes. The light vanishes, you enter hidden passageways with dingy, dim interiors where your eyes really struggle to adjust. Beneath the pleasure palaces lay hell's dark secrets, a horrific, hidden political prison. Section 4. Dungeons of the Mughals, the Price of Absolute Power. With the invasions of the Turks, Afghans, and especially the Mughals, the fort acquired a deeply sinister dimension. You see, these dungeons weren't just standard medieval jails for common criminals. No, these were specialized hellholes designed specifically for the ruling elite. Many potential threats to the Mughal throne, close relatives, even brothers of the ruling Mughal king were exiled to these dungeons. Because, well, in this era, absolute power demanded absolute ruthlessness. Let's walk through exactly how they neutralized these royal threats. Because it's dark. If you were a contender for the succession, you were exiled to the dungeons. But they didn't just lock the door and leave you be. Step 2 was totally devious. They employed force feeding of daily doses of opium, which was a local favorite. Step 3, the result was a years-long drug-induced stupor. You were left completely incapable of any planning or scheming. These inmates were literal royalty. But in captivity, the memories of their once charmed life of leisure and love would just slowly fade away into a drug-induced nightmare. And the conditions down there, absolutely horrific, with virtually zero chance of release or escape. Under the Mughals, these once elegant halls beneath the Mandir Palace were converted into terrifying torture chambers. Even today, you can see the heavy iron rings anchored right into the stone, from which it's believed prisoners were hung. In a medieval jail like this, time would just stretch out endlessly. It was an unending nightmare, buried deep in the rock, hidden from the admiring eyes above. So, the crucial point here is that being closely related to the king wasn't always a privilege. It often brought specialized, excruciating pain, because Mughal torture methods were highly creative and sometimes required a specialist. To eliminate a contender from the succession race without actually killing him was tough. Actually, scratch that, they had a brutal loophole for it: blinding. A man without eyes could never legally sit on the throne. They would extinguish the sight of their own brothers, leaving them deep in the dungeons where absolutely no one could hear their screams. And that brings us to the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves as we look at the breathtaking facade of Gwalior Fort today. Up in the grand halls, the favored royals carried on their spectacular lives, completely separated from the nightmare below. But if a palace's celebrated beauty and intricate tilework are built directly above the hidden screams of blinded brothers, what is the true, terrifying cost of absolute power? It's a haunting thought, right? One that entirely changes how we see this architectural marvel. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope it left you as fascinated and perhaps as chilled as I am.